Hello, welcome to another segment of H Talks. So I found this documentary on Venezuela, and it wasn't long that I began to draw similarities between Zimbabwe and Venezuela. Both of them have very high levels of inflation. Both of them have got a government which is concentrating on empowering itself or getting itself richer at the expense of local people. But the difference here is Venezuela has got great oil deposit and petrol, a good petrol industry, while Zimbabwe has not. But you can also draw similarities where, like Zimbabwe, in the past had a great amount of diamond deposits, just like Venezuela, they've got like a large amount of oils. But when extracting this oil, it generally benefits the government. While in Zimbabwe, looking at it, when we did have diamonds, the only people who benefited were the government officials. And now there are like underground cartels in Venezuela. There are now underground cartels trying to sell the oil illegally, just as we had in Zimbabwe. Gold partners who would go and mine and sell gold illegally just to earn a living. So let us actually get to it. This documentary is by DW Documentary. The title is Oil and Ruin Exodus from Venezuela. So, yeah, it's quite an interesting documentary. Let's get to it.
Every 2 seconds, a person is forced to flee their home. Nearly 71 million people around the world have been forcibly displaced, more than ever before. One is Marian Soria, who now lives in Berlin. Every month she sends money to Venezuela so that her family doesn't go hungry.
As we see, just like in Zimbabwe, a lot of Venezuelan people are now looking for work outside their own country, not because they want to, but they have to, because locally they can't find jobs.
Hola, hija.
Hola.
Hola, mi amor.
Pide bendición.
¿Cómo está mi pequeñita?
Bien.
Regálame un besito. ¡Mua!
Bueno, voy a venir
Tú sí.
para abrazaros.
¿Cuándo vas a venir pronto, hija? Tú sabes que tenemos que hablar mucho con Diosito para que sea el que nos dé permiso de
¿A
que
dónde
te
está
vengas
otro?
para acá, para donde está mami.
Alejandra, ¿qué te falta para irte por donde está mami?
It's actually shame.
Pasaporte.
Mothers are actually separated from their children.
Pasaporte, mi amor. No, yo no tengo sueño, yo quiero hablar contigo, pero tú no quieres hablar conmigo, hija, estás jugando. Ok, pero regálame un besito, chao.
Chao, ella no quiere hablar.
Ok, está bien, chao.
Chao.
Millions of Venezuelans have left the country, fleeing poverty and despair, even though Venezuela has the largest proven petroleum reserves in the world.
Yeah, as I was saying, just like Zimbabwe, even when we had the diamonds, a lot of people were leaving the country for a better future. It is very common for people to leave their country for a better life. And it's an achievement.
Venezuela was once South America's richest nation. Now its economy has collapsed, sparking one of the worst migrant crises of recent years.
Yes. Just like Zimbabwe, we were once the breadbasket of Southern Africa, but now you can hardly recognize the country. Because if you see it, there are a lot of similarities between Venezuela and Zimbabwe.
Cesar Batis is a Venezuelan journalist who's been documenting the crisis.
¿A usted cómo le afecta la corrupción?
A mí eso me afecta mal.
¿Por qué? ¿Cómo le afecta?
Bueno, porque el pobre no come completo.
¿Qué está comiendo usted ahorita en este momento? Lenteja y arroz. Lenteja y arroz. Y no come carne, no es un estado productor de carne. Aquí la carne se vale 30.000 bolívares.
médico no lo tiene.
30.000 bolívares. Carlos Javier Rivas.
A kilo of meat for 30,000 bolivars, more than twice the country's average monthly wage.
Yeah, of which we are getting there in Zimbabwe. Unfortunately for us Zimbabweans, a lot of people are unemployed, and hence we don't really have those accurate results which say we've got an average annual income, because it does vary from person to person depending on their businesses which they do. A lot of people are now self-employed, so having an average income, I don't know.
Many people are angry and afraid. Protests have swept the country in the capital Caracas and elsewhere.
Unfortunately, as
Security
Zimbabweans,
forces have responded with
we are not
violence.
allowed to
Hundreds of people have been killed.
We were able to determine that some people were killed because their names were on the government's food assistance list. The people in charge of those lists informed the security authority that they'd taken part in anti-government protests. It's very worrying. The lists are a form of social control. They determine who has a right to food. And they determine who's for or against Maduro's government.
Well, at least for Zimbabwe, I'm not so sure if it's a good thing or a bad thing. We do not have food lists where the government actually supplies food to people. There might be reasons pertaining to that. For example, I might say the country itself, Zimbabwe, does not have enough resources to feed people each and every day, while Venezuela has the ability to do so. So in Zimbabwe, I think what's not allowing us to feed people every day is we don't have the resources. Otherwise, if the government could do it, it would do it, and it would like increase the power they have over the people.
Cesar Batis is in Barinas, a state in the northwest of the country. As editor of the online news site El Pitazo, he's taken on a powerful opponent, the government of President Nicolás Maduro.
So basically, he's the Chingono of Venezuela.
Enthralled to money and greed, the country's oil riches have proven to be a curse.
Just like the diamond riches we had in Zimbabwe. So it goes like 10 years from now, 20 years from now, you will see oil will bring us ruin. It is the devil's experiment. I'm not so sure if we can say that for our
refinery is 300 kilometers east of Caracas. The country's abundant oil reserves are belied by the desolation here. Venezuela is not alone in this paradox. Other nations rich in oil, such as Nigeria, Angola and Sudan, are ruled by a corrupt elite, while ordinary people live in bitter poverty. Corruption and mismanagement help fuel the instability that drives people to flee.
Yes, that is something that we have to actually explore. Like, why are mineral-rich countries usually the poor countries? And you might say that it's influence from the West. Yes, it does play a part, but I think the bulk of it is due to corruption on the top. Like, people really wanting to benefit from the. Like, yes, you really can't take away the effect of the West. Was like, if someone comes in with money and he tells you like, I'll pay you like a million US dollars for you or your government to cut us a deal, that person will think of himself first before the country. So the West does have influence in the downfall of these economies, but I think governments have to stand as one to fight against this corruption.
Countries in the top 10 of Transparency International's Corruption Perceptions Index are major contributors to the international migrant crisis. Places like Afghanistan, Syria, South Sudan and Somalia.
True.
In Venezuela, though, the crisis has reached astonishing dimensions. Poverty has always been a fact of life here. But when oil prices were high, then President Hugo Chavez launched ambitious social programs. Awash in petrodollars, the country also continued to take on debt. Corruption further drained public coffers. The oil crash of 2014 was the final blow.
Yeah, this is what you see in most like countries. Like take for Zimbabwe as an example. When we had diamonds, there were a lot of promises. Like we are going to do this for the local people, we're going to do that for the local people. And when the diamonds were dilapidated, we also took a lot of debt, promising to pay it somehow. This is like how poor nations remain poor. We try to keep on taking more debt. Right now, as I speak, if Zimbabwe was offered a loan, it would take it just like that, without even thinking of the future. But then again, the people who are taking the loan are going to put the money not to the better use for the citizens, but only to benefit themselves. Corruption, which is also indicated in this documentary.
It's the most vulnerable who have suffered the most.
Just like Zimbabwe.
Mirle Quijada lives with her 7 children in a slum on Venezuela's Caribbean coast.
My husband went to Peru because of the crisis. He went there to send us help here at home. If he hadn't gone there, we would have died of hunger.
Most people like in Zimbabwe, they actually go out. They actually go out to South Africa just to feed their people. Not because they want to, but they have to. And the majority of the families here in Zimbabwe are actually surviving because of that one family member who's out there.
When he has no work for a week, he can't send me any money. Then we have only one meal a day. I try to feed the children at 2 in the afternoon, and they spend the rest of the day sleeping.
Which is a shame.
They ask me for food, but they understand when I tell them we don't have any. Sometimes they cry. It's not easy when your children beg you for food, but you have nothing to give them. It's hard, really hard.
It is. I think Zimbabwe are actually reaching that situation as well. Or we have reached that.
The United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization has warned that Venezuela may be on the brink of famine.
I also have a bone to pick with the UN. I also feel like they have a lot of programs right in place, but all these programs usually benefit large organizations, not the small independent farmers or the small business people. Because like even if you see like for their application criteria, it's usually only companies which are, for example, registered, of which a lot of Zimbabwean people do not have registered companies, and a lot of companies which have been or in operation for 10 or so years, of which the majority of these startups are actually young people who've got like brilliant ideas. So they might say they are doing big works, but they are not really tackling the problem. Because if you only fund big companies in Zimbabwe, these big companies are only just going to get stronger and stronger without even helping these little guys out there. I think more funds should actually be given to people, um, given to people starting out, and not only just give funds, they should also give guidance. So the whole structure of the UN should change, because like you can't say you are helping people but you only help, but your criteria for helping people are well established businesses. It makes no sense.
Like many in the country, Mirle Quijada's children haven't been to school in months. They can't afford the bus fare.
Which is like Zimbabwe as well. Like, bus fare is extremely expensive now.
Mirle Quijada goes to the supermarket once a week, but only when her husband has sent money from Peru. She can only get the bare necessities. Others in Venezuela can't afford food at all.
You see, the shops are full, but you can't buy it.
People
That
with
is exactly
family
what's
abroad
happening
are
in
the lucky
Zimbabwe.
ones. It's a bitter irony. The more Venezuelans flee abroad, the more money flows back home. That's been a boon for President Nicolas Maduro. His government needs hard cash.
That's the thing with
All
Zimbabwe.
accounts belonging to the state-owned oil company PDVSA in the United States have been frozen due to sanctions.
True. Same as in Zim. Same as in Zim.
Without the remittances sent by migrants, the state would be unable to import even basic foodstuffs and medicines.
If I had the chance, I'd take my children and leave. Just like that.
Me too.
This is exactly the Zimbabwean situation. If any Zimbabwean had the chance to go to South Africa, if any Zimbabwean had the chance to go to Zambia and stay there, they would go without thinking twice. They would just go, because the country is now becoming unbearable.
I would go too, but I wouldn't stay forever. I was born in Venezuela, and I want to die here.
He thinks like a lot of young Zimbabweans as well. A lot of Zimbabweans have love for the country. Like, they really want to leave the country, live in the country. But because of the current situation, the promise of a better life in a foreign land is drawing them there.
I would leave. I would leave my children here and send them money so that they could start a business. And once they've managed, I would come back. It's the crisis that makes me want to leave, but I love my country. This is where I was born, where I've always lived, where my children live.
The exact feelings of Zimbabweans.
10,000 bolivars won't even buy you flour, rice, or spaghetti. In Colombia, you can buy lots and lots for just 100 pesos. My niece
Colombia
says
is South Africa
you
for
can
them.
get loads of mangoes for what we have to pay for just one. And they'll even throw away half an apple when they're full. My other niece says that in Colombia, they have more chicken than they can possibly ever manage to eat.
Venezuelans have been leaving in droves, fleeing hunger, the collapse of the healthcare system, and soaring child mortality. Those without travel documents cross the border to Colombia illegally. The brain drain is an especially bitter blow.
Yes, this is exactly what is happening between Zimbabwe and South Africa, where a lot of Zimbabweans don't have official documents, and the way they do it is through border crossing, like illegal border crossing. Exactly like what they're doing.
Doctors, lawyers, and teachers, highly educated people that are badly needed at home.
Exactly. This is exactly what is happening.
By June 2019, some 4 million Venezuelans had left the country, out of a total population of just 30 million. Venezuela was once considered a beacon of prosperity, Caracas its glittering modern capital.
Just like Zimbabwe, Harare.
President Hugo Chavez, who died in 2013. But in the 20 years since Chavez first took office, corruption and mismanagement have spiraled out of control.
This is exactly like what Mugabe did. When he took power, a lot of people were happy, but in his rule, corruption, mismanagement of funds grew exponentially. And with one leader, a country can go bad.
One of the linchpins of this system was Rafael Ramirez. He served as Minister of Energy under Chavez, and at the same time as president of the PDVSA oil company. For years, his loyalty to Chavez allowed the president to dip into the country's petrodollars at will, without parliamentary oversight or accountability. Chavez had nearly unchecked access to oil revenues. Some went to fund far-reaching social programs, but billions also vanished into private coffers.
That is exactly what happens
Today,
to the diamonds.
as both his friends and foes call him, has gone into hiding in exile.
Yes. But unfortunately, I don't know of any Zimbabwean diamond Mungu, with the exception of the Vice President lady, Mujuru, who is now just politically silent. Yeah.
Estimate that petroleum about $700 billion over the 10 years I was in office. By my calculation, 480 billion of that came from taxes. The rest from the PDVSA's petroleum sales. So 700 billion. The big question is, what did the state do with that money? That's the big question.
It's a question Cesar Batis has also asked himself. He's in neighboring Colombia to carry out research. Nearly a quarter of Venezuelan refugees, more than 1 million people, have ended up in the country.
Exactly what Zimbabweans are doing to South Africa. We are fleeing there. We are fleeing there.
Estamos viviendo tiempos fuertes, tiempos difíciles. El pueblo de Jesús, los que han sido lavados por la sangre de Jesús, Jesucristo le dijo, mas vosotros no os turbéis.
The Venezuelan government sometimes blocks access to the border. Some young Venezuelans have gathered in Cúcuta, Colombia, under one of the border bridges.
I'm here to figure out why governments do that. Like, why do they block their citizens from going out of the country? Because here we see that in Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe restricts people from going out of the country. Like, it actively does that on the South African border. And here I'm seeing the same case in Venezuela, where it actively restricts its citizens from going out.
Venezuelan state media has a blackout on stories like this, but Cesar Batis will report on it.
Is there freedom of expression? No. We fight to preserve it every day, risking that our websites will be blocked, that we'll be publicly insulted, threatened with jail, or have our passports confiscated at the airport.
That is exactly what happens to Zimbabwean reporters. Exactly.
Their rage spills over. The young people launch an attack against Maduro's security forces. They throw rocks and are met with tear gas and rubber bullets.
This is exactly what happened during the strikes, where the protesters were met with rubber bullets and tear gas as well, when they wanted to go against Mnangagwa.
Most Venezuelans here barely scrape by. Many can only find occasional work, but they're still better off than at home. Some of the young men here were involved in the clash under the bridge. One man, hidden in a hammock, is willing to speak to Cesar Batis.
It won't happen peacefully. So how then? We have to take more drastic measures, violent ones. Will people die? Yes, but not in vain. I was there yesterday and I said to God, if I have to die for my family today, so be it.
Batis goes to meet with one of Maduro's opponents. These exiles know the system from within and are important sources. One man here used to be a close friend of the Chavez family, Wilmer Asuaje.
The systematic persecution began on the very same day I submitted evidence of the Chavez family's corruption to Parliament.
This is what happened to Chingono.
30 farming estates were involved in that corruption.
They arrest people who expose corruption.
I was jailed in 2010. My family was persecuted. My brother died in 2009.
How did he die?
He was shot.
Murdered.
Yes, murdered.
Yeah, this is what happens in Zimbabwean jails as well. But I'm not so sure if they torture them. But yeah, they do torture them, because like recently 3 women from the MDC Airlines were abducted. Apparently they were beaten up, forced to do weird stuff, and some actually sexually abused. So yeah, governments like these try to use force and intimidation to like let their people go in a straight line, follow their rules.
In 2017, Wilmer Asuaje was sent to prison for more than a year. The opposition lawmaker was only one of countless political prisoners. Like about 30 other parliamentarians, Asuaje had no choice but to flee. This video was taken by prison guards, who sent it to Asuaje's family in order to help him. Not all state employees are loyal to Maduro.
Yeah, just like in Zimbabwe, not all policemen are loyal to Mnangagwa.
What does that prove? I was kidnapped, persecuted, jailed twice. For what? Because I told the world the truth and denounced
Chingono's case exactly to the T.
Venezuela is a criminal state, and it has a society of accomplices. This society includes many civilian and military accomplices. They are all corrupt, and they're all in it together.
Venezuela's political decline began under President Hugo Chavez. His economic policies paved the way to a morass of corruption. The country's strict currency exchange system in particular opened the door to massive fraud.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Business elites, politicians and state officials obtained state-subsidized dollars through the central bank.
This is exactly what's happening in Zimbabwe, where the government is also trying to control the economic situation of the country by imposing their own exchange rates, at ridiculous levels. So yeah, I think that's one of the default systems which governments try to do, is to portray a good image to its citizens, but which is bad.
These dollars were then sold at a huge profit on the black market or deposited directly in foreign bank accounts.
Exactly what the government in Zimbabwe
The
does.
state administration remains riddled with corruption.
It does.
Billions in public revenues have gone missing.
15 billion of Zimbabwe
There's
just
any
disappeared.
aspect of life in Venezuela that's remained untouched by corruption.
Same. Schools, electricity, power supplies, everything in Zimbabwe is down.
Electricity is a good example.
Ooh, you see?
First, you allow the electrical grid to deteriorate. Second, you say there's an electricity crisis.
Exactly.
Third, the crisis allows you to award contracts without a bidding process. Fourth, this allows you to award contracts to friends.
Exactly what happens to
Fifth,
Zimbabwe.
with your friends, you can negotiate inflated prices. Sixth, that also allows you to purchase scrap rather than new equipment.
Yes.
Seventh, the result is that people die because of electrical outages in hospitals.
That is exactly to the T. You know what? If these politicians could watch these videos, they would see exactly where our country is going.
In the industrial hub of Maracay, most factories lie abandoned. Less than 20% of factories in Venezuela are still in operation. Industry has been driven into ruin. Under Chavez, numerous companies were expropriated or nationalized and then were driven into the ground by mismanagement. Rather than support private industry, Chavez used petrodollars to import goods from abroad. This helped redistribute wealth and power away from the old business elite and increase ordinary people's dependency on the government. Venezuela is now entirely reliant on the export of petroleum, gold and coltan. Almost all necessities have to be imported.
Unfortunately, this is where Zimbabwe are heading. Because if you see, the manufacturing industry now in Zimbabwe is dead. It is dead. So now we are importing sugar, toilet paper, coal, like the basic stuff. And our major exports are raw materials. We've got your coal, diamond, gold and stuff like that. Those are the only things that we are exporting. Not manufactured goods. Not manufactured goods. The agricultural industry is just going down as well. It's just going down. Now we are importing maize because we can't feed our people. We are becoming dependent on a government which cannot deliver.
As Rafael Ramirez admits, the country made another fateful economic error.
Maduro installed his military friends into key positions in industry. The man who heads the petroleum industry is a general. It was General Quevedo, who in 2014 and 2017 ordered the crushing of the protests.
So this is actually a tactic. You should realize that when these people do these things, it's not by coincidence. These people have actually studied the system and actually are following a set of rules to ensure that they stay in power. So what this Venezuelan president is doing, Mnangagwa is also doing. They are installing, they are putting their friends in key positions. The Chiwenga is the army general. The MPs are all somehow connected to Mnangagwa. The court system, they are friends of Mnangagwa. All these people, they are there for a reason. Not to serve.
Now he's head of the petroleum industry.
But to help him.
Maduro installed military people in all key industry positions. They have no idea how to run an oil industry.
These people don't have any idea of how to run the ministries that they are running, because you can't have like reshuffling of ministers, the energy minister becoming the health minister. They have no connection at all. How can a doctor say, no, let's build a plant here because it produces 6 megawatts? It makes no sense. He has no experience in that field at all. I don't know.
Oil production has collapsed due to mismanagement. Output is now the same as it was in 1945. Along with the oil industry, the military also controls the black market in gasoline. State-subsidized gasoline in Venezuela is dirt cheap. A bottle of water costs more than 1,000 liters of gasoline. Sold on the black market in Colombia, it's worth a fortune. Rafael Ramirez witnessed this corruption from the inside and knows where Venezuelan elites have stashed their dirty money.
The bottom line is, I believe that at least 30% of government revenue has been lost to corruption through mechanisms by which money is siphoned out of our country. That money flowed into private bank accounts in major industrial nations. It's not in Zimbabwe. It's in private accounts in Europe and the United States.
Funny you mention Zimbabwe.
A system of state-sponsored terror is maintaining Maduro's hold on power. The colectivos are paramilitary gangs who help quell any signs of popular dissent. They observe a strict code of silence, and the government turns a blind eye in exchange for their loyalty.
That is what Zimbabwe is doing on the Shurugi gang.
A kind of urban guerrillas troop. When Chavez came to power, the colectivos were street fighters who were supposed to keep the opposition in check.
Exactly what they do to the MDC. So the Zimbabwean government has spies all around. So if anyone is deemed to be a, what can I say, a threat, a very serious threat, just like suddenly disappears. This happened to a lot of politicians, like Chingono, the one that we are talking about these days. This prominent lady MP for getting Joanna Mamwembe. She suddenly was abducted many times. Even Chiwenga, the pastor himself, he was under threat. So I think this is what like illegitimate governments do to keep power. They deploy secret service or secret armies in the midst of the people so that they can weed out those potential threats before they become real threats.
These so-called shock colectivos are armed and deployed in case of civil unrest or the like, to suppress people who oppose the revolution. If someone sold rice at an inflated price, we'd seize it and sell it at a fair price.
Price controls.
The colectivos were supposed to be like Robin Hood. Take from the rich, give to the poor.
Maduro's support has been dwindling, but not among the colectivos. They also still defend the socialist revolution Hugo Chavez proclaimed in 1998.
These are the die-hard ZANU-PFs.
To rebuild the country, you first have to eliminate the people who have been plundering it. The members of the cabinet of ministers. Members of government who have been doing bad things. They need to go to prison. Or do what Fidel Castro's brother did. line them up against the wall, and shoot them. You can't rebuild a country where there's a leak, where dollars, wealth, food, and everything flows out of this leak. It's impossible. There's one man in this country who wants to improve things, Maduro. But no one's listening to him. He gives an order, and everyone does what they want. How can anyone rebuild a country that way?
Yeah. In this case, I think he's drawing a comparison between Mugabe, not Mugabe, Mnangagwa and their president. Mnangagwa has a few supporters, right? Like if you go to the rural areas and stuff like that, there are some people who actually believe that he's there to help him. But the majority of us, unfortunately, we can't. And we do not believe that he gives an order and no one follows him. He actually gives orders and people follow it to the T, because he tells them it's going to benefit you and it's going to benefit me. And yeah, I don't think Mnangagwa is out to benefit the country.
I never imagined I'd have to leave Venezuela one day. I had a career that allowed me to support my family. We could buy what we needed, even if it wasn't easy. Then it went downhill. We had no food, we didn't live well. As a public official, my life got more difficult. My salary wasn't enough to buy diapers or a bottle of milk.
Shame.
Not even a month's salary was enough.
That is exactly what's happening to Zimbabwe. Civil servants can't really afford life these days.
When Marian Soria still lived at home in Venezuela, she was a member of an elite unit of police called FAES, which has gained a reputation as a government death squad. According to a UN report, they've carried out thousands of extrajudicial killings. They target criminal gangs, as well as ordinary people who've taken part in protests. Marian was recruited after she graduated from university. She spent 12 months with FAES before deciding to quit, after witnessing an extrajudicial killing.
Yeah, that will be tough for me. And I wonder what she does now.
At the time, there was a search underway for Oscar Perez by the state. He was an opponent of Nicolás Maduro and was plotting to overthrow him. That's why he was officially designated a terrorist.
Oscar Perez was a former elite police officer who commandeered a military helicopter and dropped 2 stun grenades over the Supreme Court in Caracas. No one was injured. Perez had hoped to spark a military coup and free the country from corruption. But his call for an uprising went nowhere.
Yeah, because if you do that in Zimbabwe,
everyone was looking for Oscar Perez. We received information that he was somewhere near El Junquito. We went to his hideout. Then we began our raid. At 3 in the morning on January 14th, 2018.
14 de enero del 2018.
Mayor, aquí estoy.
This was just recent, 2 years ago.
As a member of FAES, Marian Soria witnessed what happened when Perez was tracked down.
Oh, shame. Killing without mercy, that's this government, what they do.
Justo ese día es cuando yo decido
That was the day when I realized I didn't belong there. I had a nervous breakdown. I cried all the time and said, that's it. Why should I be involved in things like this? I didn't go to university to kill people or to have my boss come to me and tell me to kill someone. And if I don't, they'll kill me.
Leaving her daughter Alejandra behind with her parents in Venezuela was the price she had to pay for survival. The state terror apparatus doesn't treat those who turn their back on it kindly.
Yeah. The governments don't easily let you go.
When you leave a state institution, you have information about people you worked with. That's not a risk they want to take. People who quit, especially who quit FAES, usually leave Venezuela. Otherwise, they'll be killed. They'll just say you were killed during a robbery.
Or killed during an accident.
She made her decision and planned it all without saying anything. I was sick and couldn't take care of the baby. In December 2017, she came to us and said, Mama, I think I'm going to leave the country. I said, you're crazy, don't leave me alone with the baby. She sat down with both of us and said, I'm going for a while and I'm leaving the baby with you. Even with 2 jobs, I can't keep our heads above water here. Look at how we're living. If I go, I can help you from there.
That is the promise of like a lot of people leaving the country.
I send my mother money every week or 2. It depends. Sometimes they need something unexpected, like medicine. And medicine is very expensive. But normally what I send them every 2 weeks is enough for food and for daycare.
It's tough, it's tough, it's tough.
Alejandra has been living with her grandparents since January 2018, like many other Venezuelan children whose parents have fled. Alejandra doesn't have a passport, and obtaining one is difficult in Venezuela at the moment.
Just like in Zimbabwe, like we
Marian
can't.
hasn't yet been able to bring her daughter to Germany. Meanwhile, Marian's father Angel Soria is dealing with his own problems.
Trabajo como agricultor productor de coco.
I'm a coconut farmer.
Que es el derivado del coco.
All coconut producers in this region have to pay protection money.
Ya no están cobrando vacunas a todos.
If we refuse, they threaten us and say we won't be allowed on our farms.
Shame. And in Zimbabwe, we haven't reached such a situation.
Don't go there anymore.
But I know like what we do like in Zimbabwe, they've got like masabuku. So for you to farm at a specific land, you either pay a fee for you to farm there. That is in the rural areas. Like so they've got like these villages. So for you to farm or to get a piece of land for a year, you have to pay the sabuku or pay the council a yearly fee for you to farm there. So if you don't pay that fee, the land will be given to someone else for them to farm. So yeah, I guess it's just people getting money from other people.
We've just abandoned them.
Meternos las haciendas, pero entonces abandonarlas en su totalidad.
But that harvest was how we earned a living.
Entonces, bueno, estamos en la
What are we
economía,
supposed to
pero
do now? What will happen if we're no longer able to work our land and to harvest our crops?
Criminal gangs are now in charge of his farm. They sell his coconuts by the truckload, mainly in Colombia, where they fetch a better price.
It's a shame.
The callers claimed they were guerrilla members. They said, I'm so-and-so. And then they'd list a rank and say, we're from the Colombian FARC. If you don't talk to us, you'll regret it. I replied, fine. Death doesn't frighten me.
Next to no food is produced in Venezuela. The country's cattle farms are largely abandoned. Slaughterhouses like this one stand empty.
Just like Zimbabwe, we don't have any farm produce anymore.
Price for food products. When their own production costs rose, farmers had to sell at a loss. Many farms were driven into ruin.
It's a shame.
Domestic production was replaced by state-subsidized imports. The system worked as long as oil prices were high. When oil prices collapsed, food shortages were the result.
Yeah, it's a shame when you become dependent on one form of income.
Carlos Trapani is a human rights lawyer, but the rule of law has eroded, and obtaining a hearing in the Venezuelan courts is next to impossible.
This is the Cota 905 district. We analyzed data from 1998 to 2010 to find out how many children and young people were killed by gun violence.
At least Zimbabwe don't have such violent streets or areas. Yeah, which gives Zimbabwe a better place to live.
At a Catholic school. He's a determined advocate, especially on behalf of children.
What does he enjoy? Painting, music, art? What does he like? We'll draw up a plan for him. Does he like to draw, sing, sketch, work with clay? That's the best way.
Yeah, at least in Zimbabwe, we really don't have violent gangs. We do have the Shurugu gangs here and there, but they're not like a lot. But with time, I believe Zimbabwe will actually be as violent as these other countries.
Hace 6 meses.
¿Dónde se fue?
Para Perú. En la que me ha dolido mucho casi mi mamá. Me crió y no estoy acostumbrada a sentirme de esa manera, sin mi mamá.
¿Y logras hablar con él?
Sí.
¿Cómo hablan?
Nos comunicamos por medio de WhatsApp. Pero no estoy acostumbrada a estar sin mi mamá, porque ella fue la única que me quedó así de mis familiares favoritos. Igual que mi abuela. Mi abuela está aquí, pero como mi segunda mamá.
¿Y te cuida tu abuela?
Sí. Mi papá se fue con su esposa, con mi hermana. Por parte de mi papá en su entorno se fueron todos. Cuando me enteré yo...
Shame.
Y mi papá dijo, no, yo ya no aguanto esto, yo me quiero ir a mi país. Y yo, véngase. Se volvió a su casa con su esposa, con mi hermana. Y mi hermano quedó allá.
Daniela lives with her mother and sister in the Cota 905 barrio.
I refuse to lose hope, to lose faith.
Yeah.
I want my daughters to grow up in a beautiful country.
That is the hope
People
of
say
most
Venezuela
parents.
is the most beautiful country. They say that, but they don't really mean it. They don't value what we have here. I imagine my children one day working in a hospital, in an operating room, or in a law firm, or an architectural firm.
Everyone has dreams for their children. Yeah, it makes you like see where Zimbabwe is heading. Like it really does. But the thing is, like you see, their infrastructure is way better
Venezuelans
than
are bombarded with
Zimbabwe.
propaganda on state radio and TV.
Yeah, that is everywhere in a state which is failing. Like they try to brainwash the people. They try to brainwash the people.
De los viejos, de los nuevos, ¿cuánto es eso? Son... ¿Estos no?
Was in the old currency or the new currency? So you'll be asking in bond notes or in US dollars.
Gasoline is free. It's unreal. Before the currency re-evaluation, it cost 150 bolivars. Today, that would be 0.015 bolivar cents. That's a monetary unit that doesn't even exist. So gasoline is basically given away here. I could have paid for that tank of gas with a cookie.
Tú pudieras haber pagado la gasolina con una galleta y te reciben el pago.
At least they have got one resource which is running. In Zimbabwe, we really don't.
There are long lines at the banks. People can only withdraw the equivalent of 50 US cents a week from their accounts.
That is slowly becoming a reality in
Venezuela
Zimbabwe.
has the world's highest inflation rate. Maduro has continued to print money to finance the deficit.
What we did.
Even among the top 5, Venezuela's runaway hyperinflation is eye-watering.
So looking at the list, you've got Zimbabwe with 183% and Venezuela 200,000%. That was like in 2019. Yeah. 2019. Well, yeah, Zimbabwe is number 2 in the world, eh? In the world, in the whole of the world. We need to change. We can't be like this as a country full of doctors, as a country full of engineers, as a country full of lawyers, as a country full of educated people, teachers, everything like that. We can't be like this. Number 2 in the whole world.
Trapani is being interviewed at a private radio station. There are only a few independent media outlets left in the country. Trapani is careful with his criticism.
Yeah, in Zimbabwe we don't have independent
The
outlets.
sanctions are not to blame for all the problems with the children. These problems have been around for a long time. After 2007, it got much worse. Child mortality was increasing year by year even before the sanctions.
In terms of child mortality, do you mean newborns or children who are already 5, 6, 7, or 8 years old?
Our only official child mortality data comes from the 2016 health report, which talks about neonatal mortality. That report cited nearly 11,500 avoidable deaths among children under a year old. There were no sanctions then. The number of deaths due to gun violence was already high, and there were no sanctions.
So yeah, it looks like the majority of the governments try to blame sanctions. I think there is actually a super villain book where these people read these stuffs. But like Zimbabwe, we're actually blaming sanctions. So are these guys as well?
The Caracas Children's Psychiatric Hospital already had problems. The Jose Manuel de los Rios Children's Hospital didn't have a tomograph even before the sanctions. So it's not true that the sanctions caused these problems.
For a long time, Maduro's regime denied there was a crisis. After the United States imposed sanctions, that changed. Now news of the crisis is everywhere. Carlos Trapani is listening to a speech by the Prosecutor General on state television.
And he's one of the wealthy people, and look at his house. He is one of the richest people in this country. We need to rethink our lives as a country.
¿Verdad? Que ha provocado 40,000 muertes en los últimos meses, ¿verdad? Porque no nos permiten adquirir medicina para enfermedades gravísimas y crónicas. Nos pagan cuentas bancarias en el extranjero, nos roban el oro. Tú mencionabas el siglo, eso es un robo a mano armada.
Carlos refuses to flee. He wants to stay with his family and continue to work for change, even though that's often a discouraging prospect.
It is. Yeah, even like for Zimbabweans, it's actually bad. Like, you do have hope, but as soon as you walk out of your house, you then realize that, yeah, it's going to be hard.
I want change, not only so that I can be a journalist without fear, but so that my children can live in a more peaceful country, and so that my family can live well and in peace. So that friends and family who have left the country come back again. Of course I want change.
Cesar Batis is taking his children to school. Many critical journalists have been forced into exile. So far, he's been spared.
Ni nadie podrá echar atrás ya lo que hemos venido construyendo. Lo que hemos venido construyendo, que como sabemos es absolutamente vital para conformar un mundo nuevo. Ese mundo nuevo, bueno, lo hemos llamado de muchas maneras. Una de ellas, muy común, es llamar al mundo nuevo el mundo pluripolar. Ya no será el bipolar, ya no será el unipolar, no, el mundo pluripolar.
This vision of a pluripolar world has become a reality, but not in the way that Hugo Chavez had imagined. Today, Venezuela has become the plaything of international interests. In February 2019, the United States sent humanitarian aid for delivery to Venezuela. Cesar Batis witnessed what happened. The first aid trucks were greeted with euphoria. But soon, the border crossing at the bridge became the scene of a propaganda showdown.
Yeah.
Maduro shut the border. Trucks full of food and medicine were unable to pass. Protesters clashed with Venezuelan security forces. In the end, 2 trucks went up in flames. None of the aid reached Venezuela.
But I wonder why he did that, though.
World powers are each pursuing their own aims in Venezuela. The United States, Russia, and China.
They want the oil.
Maduro y sus secuaces, y algunos en este pueblo, óiganlo,
Dicen que entregar asistencia humanitaria es un show político y una manera de encubrir la intervención militar. Pero está muy claro, solo el régimen de Maduro está utilizando la violencia.
Y aquí se ha presentado, Mario, un contrapunteo entre Estados Unidos y Rusia a propósito de la situación en Venezuela.
Like Syria and Ukraine, Venezuela has global strategic significance. The United States and Russia are jockeying for influence. Without Russian intervention, Maduro's regime would likely have collapsed. China has maintained its economic and trade ties to Venezuela, hoping to gain access to the country's vast natural resources.
Yes.
Venezuela has become a bargaining chip in a global game of poker, and a number of countries are hoping to solve the crisis to their own advantage.
True.
I spoke to Putin. I went to China. I spoke with President Rouhani of Iran, with President Bouteflika of Algeria, with the Gulf states. I understand oil. I attended OPEC meetings for 12 years. I met Minister Al-Naimi and all the oil ministers. I knew it wasn't just fracking in the United States. The deadly confrontation between the Gulf monarchies and Iran, between the Gulf states and Russia, that would fracture the unity of OPEC states. Look at the death that has overtaken Libya and Syria. The geopolitical terrain has shifted. In North Africa, in the Mediterranean, and oil is a key factor. I told Maduro that the price of oil would fall. He said yes, because of fracking. I said this has nothing to do with fracking. They're killing each other. And the collapse in oil prices is simply a strategy on the part of the Gulf monarchies to weaken Iran and Russia. You need to understand that. But he did nothing.
Interesting.
The geopolitical terrain is shifting, and in this new Cold War, new countries are becoming a battleground for competing interests.
Yeah,
The citizens of those countries are being left to fend for themselves.
just saying, like, if diamond actually becomes a big
Find
thing,
themselves displaced, forced to flee for their
it
survival.
won't benefit the local people. Just like the oil here is not benefiting the local people.
Hija, un besito, pequeña.
Ajá, dile la oración de dormir. Vamos a rezar la oración de dormir, mamá. No. Con Dios.
Por yo me acuesto, por yo me levanto, con la clase de Dios de Espíritu Santo.
Mira, no dijiste la oración. No dijiste la oración de dormir con ella. Ven, pues. Se fue. Se cansó.
Shame.
Hija, chao, mi amor, dame un besito.
Se fue.
It's a kid, eh?
Pequeña,
Se fue.
pequeñita.
Se perdió, se fue, se cansó.
Así es todos los días, nunca quiere hablar conmigo.
This is how it is every day.
Su manera
She
de-
never wants to
yo
talk to
siento que
me.
su manera de decirme
I think
que me
avoiding me is her way of telling me she misses me.
me va a ver.
She tells me, I'm tired, I'm sleepy. My grandma has told me to clean my room. I ask her, did she send you away to clean your room? She says, yes, bye-bye, I'm very busy.
Chao, estoy muy ocupada.
She's always looking for an excuse not to talk to me.
Para no hablar conmigo.
And when she wants to, it's too late over
Cuando
here.
quiere, entonces ya que es muy tarde.
Shame. It has been an interesting watch, just comparing the two, Venezuela and Zimbabwe. There are a lot of similarities and there are a lot of warnings that we should take heed as a country. Venezuela is definitely like up there. As we saw, the inflation rate 200,000%, while Zimbabwe is 183. Yeah, so we as citizens, we should keep watch just to make sure that the government is on track. How we are going to do that, I have no idea. but I'm sure that we are going to come up with a good strategy to do so. Anyway, thanks again for watching. Enjoy.